The phone call came at 6:30 on a Thursday morning in April of 1987. Howard Mitchell was pouring his first cup of coffee when he heard his son's truck pull into the yard. Too early for a social visit, too urgent for good news. His son, Brian, came through the kitchen door without knocking, face flushed, carrying a folder of paperwork. "Dad, we need to talk." Howard set down his coffee cup. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I just made the best decision for this farm's future." He spread the papers across the kitchen table. Purchase agreements, financing documents, dealer invoices. Howard looked at the numbers at the bottom of the page and felt his chest tighten. "You bought 3 tractors? 3 Case IH Magnums, the 7130, 7140 and 7150, top of the line, brand new. They're being delivered next Tuesday." "For how much?" "Total package with the trade-in allowance, $285,000. Financed over 7 years at 9.5%. Howard sat down slowly. $285,000. "Dad, I know it sounds like a lot, but this is what we need to compete. Our equipment is ancient. We're falling behind. These new Magnums will let us farm twice as fast, cover more ground, be more efficient." "Where did you sign these?" "At Miller's Case IH yesterday afternoon. Everything's approved. Bank signed off on the financing. It's done." Howard looked at his son, at the excitement in his eyes, at the certainty that he'd made the right choice, at the complete lack of understanding about what he'd just done. "Brian, you're 29 years old. You've been farming with me for 7 years. In all that time, what's the one rule I've never broken?" Brian shifted his weight. "Dad, what's the rule?" "No equipment debt. No equipment debt, that's right. And you just put us $285,000 into equipment debt without asking me. Because I knew you'd say no. Because you refuse to see that farming has changed. We can't compete with 40-year-old tractors anymore." Howard's jaw tightened. "When are they delivering these tractors?" "Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. "To this farm?" "Yes, to this farm. Where else would they deliver them?" Howard stood up, walked to the window, looked out at his machine shed, at the 3 Farmall tractors that had farmed this ground for 30 years, at the equipment that was paid for, that worked, that had never put his farm at risk. He turned back to his son. "No." "What?" "No. They're not delivering those tractors here." "Dad, the contracts are signed, the financing is approved, the tractors are sold." "Then you'd better find somewhere else to put them because they're not coming onto my property. This is insane. This is our farm." "No," Howard said quietly. "This is my farm. My name is on the deed, and nothing comes through that gate without my approval." Brian's face went red. "You can't do this. Watch me." "Dad, I'm a partner in this operation. I have a say." "You're an employee who draws a salary and shares in profits. You're not a partner. You don't own any of this land, and as long as that's true, my rules apply." Brian stared at his father for a long moment. Then he grabbed his paperwork, stormed out, and drove away fast enough to spray gravel. Howard stood at the window, watching the dust settle. Then he walked out to his machine shed, climbed onto his 1956 Farmall 400, and started thinking about Tuesday morning. "Before we go any further, I need you to understand what's at stake here. This isn't about stubbornness. This isn't about refusing progress. This is about a father watching his son sign papers that could destroy everything a family had built over 40 years. And if you want to know why Howard Mitchell was willing to create a family crisis rather than let those tractors onto his farm, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear explains the difference between farms that survive and farms that disappear. Let me tell you about Howard Mitchell in 1987. He was 58 years old. He'd been farming since 1952 when he came back from Korea and took over his father's operation. 480 acres of good ground in central Illinois. Not huge by modern standards, but enough to make a living if you were careful. Howard ran corn and soybeans, did all his own field work, maintained his equipment himself, operated on principles his father had taught him and his grandfather before that. Own what you use, fix what breaks, and never put the farm at risk with debt you can't pay off in a single good year. His equipment was old. 3 Farmall tractors, a 1956 400, a 1964 706, and a 1970 1206, all bought used, all paid for in cash, all maintained meticulously. His son Brian had different ideas. Brian had gone to the University of Illinois, studied agricultural business, came back in 1980 with a head full of modern farming concepts: efficiency, economies of scale, leverage, growth. For 7 years, Howard had listened to his son's ideas and said no to most of them. No to financing new equipment. No to leasing more ground they couldn't afford to farm. No to expanding faster than their income supported. Brian had chafed under these restrictions, felt held back, felt like his father didn't trust him or respect his education. And finally, Brian had gone around him. The weekend before Tuesday's delivery was tense. Brian didn't come to the farm on Friday, didn't show up Saturday. Howard worked alone, checking equipment, preparing for planting season, trying to figure out how to handle what was coming. His wife Carol found him in the barn Saturday evening. "You need to talk to him." "I tried. He's not listening." "Howard, he's your son. You can't let this destroy your relationship. He signed contracts that could destroy this farm. What am I supposed to do? Just accept it?" Carol sat down on a hay bale. "What are you going to do Tuesday morning?" "Stop them from delivering those tractors." "How?" Howard didn't answer right away. He'd been thinking about it for 3 days, thinking about the gate at the end of his driveway, about the only road into his farm, about what it would take to physically prevent a delivery. "I'm going to block the gate." "With what?" "The Farmall." Carol looked at him. "You're going to park your tractor across the gate?" "I am." "Howard, that's crazy. What if they just drive around you? There's a drainage ditch on both sides. Only way in is through the gate. If I block it, they can't deliver." "And then what? Brian still signed those contracts. The bank still approved the loan. Eventually they'll deliver those tractors somewhere." "Not to my farm, they won't. Not while I'm alive." Carol shook her head. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." "I know. But what's the alternative? Let him bury us in debt? Watch this farm get foreclosed in 5 years when we can't make the payments? I won't do it, Carol. I won't watch everything we built get destroyed because my son thinks new equipment equals success." "Let me stop here and ask you something. Have you ever had to make a choice between being liked and being right, between preserving a relationship and protecting what matters most?" Drop a comment, because Howard Mitchell made that choice, and it nearly cost him his son. Monday night, Howard barely slept. He lay in bed thinking about Tuesday morning, about the confrontation that was coming, about his son's anger, about the delivery drivers who were just doing their job, about the spectacle he was about to create. At 4 a.m., he gave up on sleep, got dressed, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table in the dark. At 5:30, he walked out to the machine shed, climbed onto his 1956 Farmall 400, the tractor his father had bought 31 years ago, the tractor that had ploughed every acre of this farm for 3 decades. He started the engine, let it warm up, then drove it slowly down his driveway to the gate. The farm entrance was a 16-foot-wide gap in the fence line. Gravel driveway, metal gate that swung open, room enough for farm equipment to pass through. Howard positioned the Farmall directly in the center of the opening, perpendicular to the road, blocking the entire entrance. He shut off the engine, climbed down, stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, looking at what he'd done. That tractor wasn't moving, and nobody was delivering anything to his farm without going through him first. The sun came up. Howard waited. At 8:15, Brian's truck came down the county road, fast, angry. He pulled over onto the shoulder, got out, walked toward where his father stood beside the Farmall. "What are you doing?" keeping those tractors off my property. Dad, this is insane. Move the tractor. No. The delivery trucks are going to be here in 45 minutes. You can't do this. Watch me. Brian's hands clenched into fists. I signed those contracts. They're my tractors. Then find somewhere else to keep them, because they're not coming here. This is my farm too. I work this ground. I deserve a say in what equipment we use. You had a say. You had 7 years of discussions, 7 years of me explaining why we don't finance equipment, 7 years of me teaching you how to farm without debt. You chose not to listen. You went behind my back and signed contracts that put everything at risk. At risk? Dad, we'll make more money with better equipment. We'll be more efficient. We'll have $5,000 monthly payments for 7 years, Howard interrupted. We'll be trapped. If we have one bad crop year, one drought, one price crash, we won't be able to make those payments, and the bank will take everything. That won't happen. It's happening to farms all over this county. Tom Henderson lost his place last year because of equipment debt. Bill Morris is filing bankruptcy next month. Jack Patterson is selling out. All of them bought new equipment on credit. All of them thought they could handle the payments. All of them were wrong. A semi-truck appeared in the distance, coming down the county road. Green Case IH dealer markings on the trailer. Both men turned to look. Now I want to hear from you. If you were Brian, would you have backed down? If you were Howard, would you have had the courage to do what he did? Leave a comment, because this moment right here determined the future of the Mitchell farm. The delivery truck slowed as it approached. The driver saw Howard's Farmall blocking the gate, saw the 2 men standing there, pulled over and stopped. A man in his 40s climbed out of the cab, Jerry Sanders, the hauler who did equipment deliveries for Miller's Case IH. Morning, Howard. Got a delivery for you. Not today, Jerry. Jerry looked at the Farmall blocking the gate. Is there a problem? There is. These tractors aren't coming onto my property. Jerry pulled out his clipboard. Sir, I've got signed purchase orders here. Customer name Brian Mitchell. Delivery address 2840 County Road 18. That's this farm. I'm aware. I'm also the owner of this property, and I'm refusing delivery. Jerry scratched his head. Sir, these are expensive machines. I can't just take them back to the dealership. They're sold. That's between your dealership and whoever signed those papers, but they're not coming through this gate. Brian stepped forward. I signed those papers. I'm the buyer. These are my tractors. Do you own this property? Jerry asked. Brian hesitated. My father does. Then unless he authorizes it, I can't deliver here. That's the policy. Jerry pulled out his phone, called the dealership. Had a long conversation with someone. Hung up. Folks, I'm going to need you to work this out amongst yourselves. I'll wait here 30 minutes. If I can't deliver by then, I'm taking these back, and someone from Miller's is going to call you. He climbed back into his cab, left the engine running. Brian turned to his father. Please, Dad, please move the tractor. No, you're humiliating me. The whole county is going to hear about this. Good. Maybe it'll stop someone else from making the same mistake. It's not a mistake. It's an investment. It's debt, and debt is risk, and I won't risk this farm. Then what do? I signed contracts. I owe the bank money whether these tractors get delivered or not. Howard's expression softened slightly. You go back to Miller's. You explain that you made a mistake. You cancel the sale. You pay whatever cancellation fees they charge. And you learn from this. They're not going to let me cancel. The loan is approved. The tractors are built. Then that's a problem you're going to have to solve. But you're not solving it by bringing those tractors here. They stood there in the morning sun. Father and son. The old Farmall between them like a physical representation of everything they disagreed about. Finally, Brian's shoulders slumped. I hate you right now. I know. But someday you'll understand why I did this. Brian walked back to his truck, drove away, Jerry waited the full 30 minutes. Then he climbed down from his cab one more time. "Howard, I'm taking these back, but this isn't over. The dealership's going to call. The bank's going to call. This is going to be a mess." "I know. Thanks for being professional about it, Jerry." The semi-truck made a careful 3-point turn on the county road and headed back toward town. 3 brand-new Case IH Magnums still strapped to the trailer. Never delivered. Howard climbed back onto his Farmall 400, drove it back to the machine shed, parked it in its usual spot. Then he walked into his house, sat down at the kitchen table, and waited for whatever came next. If you're still watching this, if this story is hitting close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's facing pressure to take on debt they can't afford. Someone who needs to know that sometimes the right decision is the unpopular one. The fallout was immediate and severe. Miller's Case IH called Tuesday afternoon, angry, confused, wanted to know what was going on. The bank called Wednesday morning, the loan officer who'd approved Brian's financing, concerned about the disrupted delivery. And Brian didn't come to the farm for a week. When he finally showed up the following Tuesday, it was with different paperwork. Cancellation agreements, penalty fees, a $15,000 charge for backing out of the deal. "Are you happy?" Brian threw the papers on Howard's kitchen table. $15,000, that's what your stubbornness cost. "Who's paying it?" "I am. It's coming out of my savings. Everything I've saved working for you for 7 years. Howard picked up the papers, looked at the numbers. Better than $285,000 in debt. "Easy for you to say. It's not your money." "Brian, sit down." "I don't want to sit down." "Sit down anyway." Brian sat, reluctantly, arms crossed. Jaw tight, Howard pulled out his farm's financial records, 35 years of ledgers, income and expenses meticulously recorded. "Look at 1980. Brian glanced at the page. "What about it?" "Our net income that year was $42,000. Good year, strong crop, everything went right." He flipped ahead. "Look at 1983. Drought, net income $18,000. Look at 1985. Price crash, net income $21,000. He looked at his son. "If we'd had $5,000 monthly equipment payments, that's $60,000 a year. In 1983 and 1985, we would have lost money. We would have had to borrow against the farm to make those payments. Within 3 years, we'd be facing foreclosure. But we didn't have those payments, so we survived bad years. We kept farming. We're still here." Brian stared at the numbers. "It's not fair. Other farmers have new equipment. They're farming bigger. They're making more money. Some of them are. Some of them are also going broke. You know how you tell the difference. The ones going broke are the ones with debt they can't service when times get hard. So what? We just keep farming with equipment from the 60s forever? Until we can pay cash for something better, yes. Brian, I'm not against progress. I'm against debt. If you can find a way to upgrade our equipment without borrowing money, I'll support it. But I won't put this farm at risk." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Brian spoke. "I don't know if I can keep farming like this, watching everyone else modernize while we fall behind." "Then maybe farming isn't for you. And I mean that with love. If you need new equipment and debt and growth to feel successful, you should find a different career, because this farm is never going to operate that way as long as I'm alive." The relationship between Howard and Brian remained strained through the rest of 1987 and into 1988. Brian came to work, did his job, but there was a distance between them that hadn't been there before. Then, in the fall of 1988, something happened that changed everything. A farm 5 miles down the road went to auction. Dan Fletcher's place, 640 acres. Dan was 52 years old. He'd bought 3 new John Deere tractors in 1985, beautiful machines, powerful, efficient. He couldn't make the payments when the drought hit in 1988. Bank foreclosed. Everything went to auction. Howard and Brian went together, stood in the crowd watching Dan's life get sold off piece by piece. The 3 John Deere tractors sold for less than half what Dan owed on them. The farm sold for $200,000 less than the mortgage. Dan and his family walked away with nothing. Worse than nothing, they walked away owing money even after losing everything. After the auction, Brian and Howard stood by their truck. "That could have been us," Brian said quietly. "Yes. If you'd let those tractors come through the gate, if we'd taken on that debt, that would be us standing there, watching everything get auctioned off." Howard didn't say anything. Didn't need to. "I'm sorry, Dad. You were right. I was wrong." Howard put his hand on his son's shoulder. "You weren't wrong to want better equipment. You were wrong about how to get it. There's a difference." "So, what do? We farm smart. We save money. We buy equipment when we can pay cash. We build this operation slowly and safely, and we make sure that 30 years from now, you're not standing at an auction, watching your son lose everything because you taught him the wrong lessons." The years after 1988 changed how the Mitchell farm operated. Howard began transitioning more responsibility to Brian, but Brian now understood the principles behind his father's decisions. Understood why debt was dangerous, why patience was more important than speed, why survival mattered more than growth. In 1992, they bought a used 1980 Case IH Magnum 7140 at an auction, paid $28,000 cash. The same model Brian had tried to buy new for $95,000 5 years earlier. In 1995, they added a 1985 Magnum, another auction purchase, $22,000 cash. By 1998, they were farming with equipment that averaged 15 years old, not new, not the latest technology, but modern enough, capable enough, and completely paid for. Howard retired in 2002 at age 73, signed the farm over to Brian. His one condition, no equipment debt. Brian agreed. He'd learned the lesson, the hard way but thoroughly. Today, Brian Mitchell is 66 years old, still farming the same ground his grandfather broke, still following the principles his father nearly destroyed their relationship to teach him. The 1956 Farmall 400, the tractor Howard parked across the gate that April morning in 1987, still sits in the machine shed. Retired now, but preserved. A reminder of the day a father loved his son enough to block the gate with 40-year-old equipment rather than let him make a decision that could destroy 3 generations of work. Brian's son James farms with him now. And recently, James came to his father with an idea about financing some new equipment. Brian drove him to a spot beside the county road, pointed to the gate. "See that entrance? Your grandfather stood right there in 1987 and physically blocked it with an old tractor to keep me from making the biggest mistake of my life. He was willing to look like a crazy old fool to protect this farm. He taught me that debt amplifies everything, good years and bad years, and in farming there are more bad years than anyone wants to admit. So if you want new equipment, great. Show me how we can pay cash for it. But if your plan involves debt, I'm going to do exactly what my father did. I'm going to block the gate and keep that debt from coming onto this property." James nodded slowly. "Understood." "Good. Now let's go look at some used equipment auctions. So let me leave you with this. Right now, someone's trying to convince you that you need something you can't afford, that debt is normal, that everyone does it this way, that you're falling behind if you don't leverage and grow. But Howard Mitchell proved something different. He proved that sometimes love looks like a tractor blocking a gate, that protecting what matters means accepting conflict, that being right is more important than being liked. The son signed for 3 new Case IHs worth $285,000. The dad blocked the gate with his old Farmall. The son thought his father was destroying their future. The father was saving it. If this story changed how you think about debt, family, and doing what's right even when it's hard, do three things. First, subscribe to this channel for more stories about families who survived by choosing principle over popularity. Second, drop a comment. Have you ever had to protect someone from a decision that would have hurt them? Third, share this with someone who's facing pressure to take on debt they can't afford. The tractor blocking the gate looked like stubbornness. It was actually love. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.